Kylie Jenner is being accused of copying Shane Dawson. Trisha Paytas is trying to launch her own Frenemies podcast. And I sat through Tana's new podcast called Cancelled, so you guys don't have to. It's a mess, so let's get into it.
Exposed. Exposed. You're exposed. You're exposed. You are exposed. Exposed, 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 exposed. You are exposed, sir. I'm going to expose you. Expose you. Oh my God, expose you.
So let's start off with Kylie Jenner. A few months ago, Kylie Cosmetics wiped their entire Instagram feed clean and said something new was coming soon. She ended up relaunching the brand with a new clean vegan formula, and Kylie fans were super excited. To get some more attention around the whole rebrand, Kylie also dropped a 3-part series on YouTube titled Inside Kylie Cosmetics. This series went into how Kylie Cosmetics started, how things work behind the scenes, and the last episode was all about her rebrand. Well, according to Lizzie and Ryland, Kylie Jenner is copying Shane and Jeffree. Nearly 2 whole years ago now, Shane did a series with Jeffree Star called The Beautiful World of Jeffree Star. It was a 7-part series, and it was supposed to follow the behind the scenes of the beauty community and all the drama that unfolds in it, but it ended up being all about Shane's palette. Looking back now, a lot of people think Shane just pretended to love makeup because he knew that he would make millions off of that collection, and some people feel like his whole series was just one big ad. On last week's episode of The Sip, Lizzie and Ryland talked about the documentary that Kylie released on her rebrand, and they think it was heavily inspired by Shane. Lizzie was actually the first person to bring it up, and she was like, wasn't Shane's documentary called Inside the World of Jeffree Star? And then Kylie calls hers Inside Kylie Cosmetics? Ryland acts a little bit hesitant to admit that she might have copied, and he just says like, oh, I'm sure she's not the one that made that title. But Lizzie, on the other hand, Lizzie is adamant that it's copied. Lizzie goes on about how we all know a documentary works really well to sell a product because of Shane's success with it, and the fact that Kylie now went and did the same thing and apparently even titled it the same thing is a little bit suspicious. Lizzie said even if they didn't see Shane's series, it still feels heavily inspired by it. Ryland, on the other hand, thinks that's just a large part of YouTube. People do one thing that does really good, and then 10 other people try and copy it because it works. Lizzie feels like the fact that they use the same title is just way too much of a giveaway that they were inspired by Shane. The funny thing is though, Shane's title for Jeffree's series wasn't ever Inside the World of Jeffree Star. Not one out of all 7 videos was titled that. I'm guessing Lizzie got confused with Shane's other series on Jake Paul. One of those videos was called Inside the Mind of Jake Paul. So I guess Kylie didn't copy Shane and Jeffree after all. Next, we have to talk about Trisha's new podcast. Ever since Frenemies ended, I think Trisha has been desperately trying to replace Frenemies with something that gives them the same feeling. They've done the Zach Sang Show, Trash Tuesday, and Tana's Cancelled podcast. Well, Trisha started their own podcast called Enemies. The first episode was actually a few weeks ago, and honestly, I thought it was a joke. Then, this week, Trisha posted episode number 2 of Enemies, so I guess this is just a thing now. Since this podcast is pretty much a spin-off of Frenemies, I was expecting maybe a little bit of production value, maybe a nice little set, a nice backdrop, just some kind of production value, you know? Trisha is giving us none of that. The most production value we're getting is Trisha getting glammed every Monday to film. It's literally just another one of Trisha's typical rant style videos. In this week's podcast, and I say podcast very, very lightly, Trisha talked about the usuals: David Dobrik, Jeff Wittick, and Natalie. They start off the video by saying they don't really like inserting themselves into other people's lives, which is really funny coming from someone hosting a podcast called Enemies. Trisha says they don't have any respect for David Dobrik or Jason Nash, but they do feel like David has some redeeming qualities. Trisha spends a good part of this episode just dragging Natalie for going on the BFFs podcast last week and pretty much defending David. Trisha pretty much called Natalie dumb because she went to school in Illinois.
And it all seemed rather sincere until Natalie Noel or whatever. Natalie is honestly the worst person in the whole world. She has no common sense. I'm for the sake of this video, I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt and just say that she's raised in Illinois and was educated in Illinois.
Trisha said they can relate because they were also raised in Illinois and apparently had to come over to LA to get their brains. Trisha's video currently sits at over 6,000 dislikes, and the comments reflect that. I thought Trisha was the star of Frenemies, but now I'm realizing it was Ethan. You can call this a podcast all you want, but it's literally no different from any of your other unedited drama rant videos. I feel like Trisha's gonna learn real quick why Ethan needed to take that 5%. Finally, we have to talk about Tana Mojo. Tana dropped her new podcast called Cancelled, and I sat through an entire hour of Tana, so you don't have to. First of all, Tana's co-host is her ex-boyfriend Hunter and her ex-best friend that she made a storytime video about and caused her to get an overwhelming amount of hate for. What could possibly go wrong? But just like I thought, the episode was messy and Tana did spill a little bit of tea. First of all, Tana talked about her experience moving into David Dobrik's old house. Apparently, it's been a complete nightmare. She was moving out of her old house at the Macleod house and couldn't find a place to live. She was searching for like 6 months, but everyone was rejecting her because they didn't want a YouTuber renting their house. I mean, you can't really blame them, can you? Hunter even exposed Tana and was like, well, you did go to every open house, not completely sober. Tana said David's house was like the absolute last resort for them, and they're already looking to move out ASAP. Apparently, there's a ton of bugs like cockroaches, centipedes, and they even have rats. Not only that, but the house also apparently needs like $400,000 of repairs so it doesn't fall during an earthquake. Tana also said fans are showing up to their house nonstop because everyone knows where David's old house is. The next bit of tea was about Corinna. Corinna and Tana have an interesting relationship. I feel like you can never tell if they actually hate each other or if they just have like surface level internet beef just for engagement. For example, a few months ago when boxing was popular, Corinna tweeted that she wanted to fight Tana, not for clout, just for a check. Then, a few weeks ago, Corinna went on the Impulsive podcast and they brought up Tana, and Corinna said they aren't friends anymore and she doesn't think Tana's that great of a person.
You think so?
I don't mean to be, but she just seems like very sloppy, drunk or not.
Have you met her?
Yes, we used to be friends. And then I saw, okay, I don't want to get into it, but we went on tour together and I just didn't have a good experience. And ever since then, I just felt kind of
Wait, Tana?
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm not going to get into it. I just don't, I don't think she's that great of a person. I don't think she's that great of a person. I've never spoken publicly about it, but I just...
Not even now.
I don't know. I just see like random videos of her and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Tana also had something to say about Corinna on her podcast. Apparently, it was Corinna's scandal about liking Trump that ended their friendship. Tana offered to help Corinna out of that scandal and was trying to give her advice, but Corinna wanted no part in it. Tana said Corinna was like, so what about my political views? And that made Tana feel like maybe they shouldn't be friends. During Tana's podcast, they also talked about influencers and celebrities that use their power for the wrong reasons. They talked about influencers who message fans, and Tana called James Charles out by name. Tana says the whole James Charles situation is when people finally started to really talk about the dangers of power dynamics in influencer to fan relationships. Tana says she doesn't understand it and she would never date a fan. Finally, the last bit of tea in Tana's video was actually an apology. Last month, Tana got herself into some Twitter drama when she tweeted, "All I know to tweet about my birthday party last night is that Tristan Thompson was one of the first attendees. Like, babe, where's true?" Tana got a ton of backlash, and Chloe was even liking tweets calling her out for bringing up her child. Well, Tana issued an apology to Chloe during her podcast. Tana said she was just trying to make a joke and she should have never got herself involved. She was more shocked to see Tristan at this party and doing the things that she saw him doing on Father's Day. Of course, even though the issue was only addressed for like maybe a few minutes tops, Tana had to title her first episode, "Beefing with the Kardashians." Anyways guys, let me know what you think about everything down below. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button because it really does help my channel, and I'll see you next time.